Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us again this week on Uncorked PA, a show focused on Pennsylvania vineyards, wineries, and of course, wine. My name is Missy Wilson. I'm a second generation winery owner at Sutter Ridge Vineyards, and I've been blessed to be part of the Pennsylvania wine industry for almost 20 years now. This month, we're inspired by Earth Day and springtime in the vineyard. Earth Day began in 1970, and today we can celebrate by getting outdoors and visiting your local vineyards and wineries. It's a great day to spend some time outside and be reminded about how amazing our planet is. So go for a hike or head out to a bike trail and finish with a glass of wine at a nearby winery and enjoy their amazing vineyard views. Also, it's a great time to get inspired with springtime meal of fresh vegetables and pair it with your favorite Pennsylvania wine. Many wineries are actually having their own Earth Day celebrations with plantings in upcycled containers, special pairings, or even cleaning up of local roadways. So visit PennsylvaniaWine.com to map out the wineries that are close by to you and choose to join an already scheduled event or create your own special Earth Day. So while we're chatting about Earth Day, I'm so happy to have our first guest on for the day, Kane Hickey. He's a viticulture extension agent for Pennsylvania and does research through Penn State. He's also a Penn State grad who received his PhD from Virginia Tech. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon, Kane.
Thank you for having me, Missy.
Yeah,
Good to be back.
we were lucky to have you on the show a couple months ago when we were talking about some hybrid grapes. So can you remind our listeners about what you do as a viticultural extension educator?
Yeah, I can. Basically, my job is to work with the industry in the state of Pennsylvania and the region and serve the technical needs of grape growing. So whether that be written communication, phone calls, site visits, workshops, webinars, we do all those things to try to educate and serve the technical needs of grape growing in Pennsylvania. I always say that to the folks in the industry, my job is to help people grow the best grapes they can, given the limitations of their site.
Exactly. So, in the vineyard right now, we're actually starting to move into an exciting time. So, most vineyards should be, and hopefully are, in the process of finalizing their pruning and tie downs. So, my vineyard manager was saying she was going out and giving all the vines their haircuts. So, can you let us know why it's important to actually prune, and why don't vineyards let their grapes and their vines just continue growing without pruning them?
Yeah. So pruning's a perennial practice. Grapevines are a perennial fruit crop. And so pruning is a perennial practice that removes the unwanted wood and along with it buds. So if you did not remove those unwanted buds, as Missy just showed here, you would have yourself not only a very congested canopy full of vegetative growth, but also crop yields that would be unmanageable, likely too high. So the act of pruning really is just to manage a crop. And this is, you're getting closer there with that picture, is to manage the crop and set up the crop for the forthcoming season's growing season so that the crop is balanced and that it is easily managed within the confines of the training system. So it's really to manage the crop and really care about really care about the perennial health of the grapevine in terms of crop, but also health of the vine. We can, the fungicides and the pesticides we spray on the vines will penetrate better with a canopy that's more open to light and air movement. And so if you didn't prune, you just have a crop that was too high and a canopy that'd be commercially tough to manage.
So why wouldn't like a vineyard want to have it grow as many grapes as they possibly could? Like, what's the detriment to having too many grapes and too much crop on that vine?
A couple concerns. Mainly, having all of that crop, again, it would be tough to manage because in the case of not pruning, it would be borne throughout the canopy and wouldn't be all in one confined fruit zone. And so you couldn't target your fungicide sprays and management at that. Another thing is that if the crop's too high, you can have poor fruit quality. And then also, if the crop is too high, it can result in perennial health concerns like vineyard sustainability. And so I always tell folks, you want to farm a vine to give you a crop. You don't want to farm a crop, right? So because it's a perennial fruit production system, you're farming that vine and you're caring about the health and sustainability of that vine to give you a crop for the next 25 to 30 years.
Perfect. So, just like trees throughout the winters, the vines actually stay dormant, and we're starting to see the trees go through the next stage, which is the bud break. Everything's starting to be really pretty and pink or green or whatever else. So, can you talk about bud break in the vineyard and why it's such an exciting time of year for us?
Yeah, it's exciting because we were just talking before we went live here. There's always time for stress and concern when you own a vineyard, right? And so the thing that bud break tells us is that we have a chance at producing a crop, because if something happened like a cold injury or a polar vortex or anything that hurt the buds or the perennial tissues, the trunk or the cordons of the vine, you might not get bud break because that vine might have been dead, right? So like you're seeing here, that's the sign that there's hope, that there's life in that vine. So seeing buds is a good sign, and it tells you that there's potential for a crop. So there's that. So there's a sign that you've made it through the winter and you have a chance at a crop. The other thing that's exciting, or again maybe somewhat stressful, is that when bud break happens, you're not off. You're not off clear yet, because then there can be, oftentimes bud break happens well before the final frost event happens. And so that can be stressful too, because if buds break and you get an event that is below 32 degrees is freezing, but sometimes it needs to be a little colder than that to kill these buds, depending on the growth stage they're at. That can also detrimentally affect a crop, right? So it's an exciting time of the year, because it's really the demarcation of a new growing season and a new vintage. But again, because vines are they can often break bud before the final frost date. It's exciting in a nervous sense, because we still, after bud break happens, we still sometimes have 3 to 4 weeks where we're watching the forecast very, very anxiously, hoping that we're not seeing any temperatures that could damage these buds, because if these buds are damaged, that's the primary bud. The grapevine bud is a compound bud. It's usually tertiary, and so this primary bud carries with it the highest crop potential. And if that gets frosted or it gets cold injury, then the secondary bud will push, but that secondary bud bears less crop than that primary bud. So there's a fiscal concern about it too, in terms of just not being able to produce as much crop if you get a frost or cold event.
So, bud break is going to be happening shortly in a lot of vineyards in Pennsylvania, throughout Pennsylvania. So, if listeners are interested to see the actual bud break itself and see the vines start to, push through, and you have those really pretty pink buds that you saw up there before, what time frame do you usually anticipate heading out? And then after bud break happens, what's the next big thing that goes on?
Oh yeah. So bud break will be. Let me just say this: in the state of Pennsylvania, bud break will start in the southeast and work its way northwesterly, right? So if you're in the far southeast, it's going to happen first, and then as you work your way west and north, so into central PA or northeastern PA or all the way up to northwestern PA, bud break will be delayed. But so southeast is first, and depending on the cultivar and the site, like as far as Chester County, down there in that area, you will start seeing bud break probably as early as mid next week, mid to late next week. And then, like Missy, where you're at, I assume you guys might start seeing bud break in your early stuff like Chardonnay and Cabernet Franc, probably in 10 to 14 days, something like that. So in the next week or two, if you go out to the vineyards and wineries in southeastern PA, you should be able to see some bud break. So go visit them and see the wonder, the beautiful bud break in action.
Exactly. And then after bud break,
Oh.
what's the next kind of big thing that is going on in the vineyard?
I'm sorry, you did ask me that, and
That's
I
okay.
failed to answer. Yeah, so the next thing, and I think that'll be maybe the next time I'm on, is to talk about bloom. And so that is kind of the next growth stage. That's another exciting transition for the grapevine. So bud breaks first, and then bloom will be the next opportunity to set that full crop potential. So maybe if you invite me back, we'll talk a little bit about that, and I guess that will be mid to late May.
In about a month past us. Yes, exactly. So it's actually a great time to head out and kind of see the wonders of what is happening in the vineyards. And thanks so much for all this great info, Kane, because people really, I think our listeners are so appreciative of getting a little bit more knowledge about what's on in the vineyard and how the grapes actually grow. So thanks for joining us today, and we hope to have you on again in a couple weeks or so.
Thanks for the
All right.
invitation, Missy.
You're welcome. Thanks, Kane.
Okay, bye.
All right. So, in addition to Earth Day, this month we're actually celebrating spring and the special holidays of Passover and Easter. So, although spring actually began a few weeks ago, the weather is finally starting to warm up a little bit and the rain hopefully is lessening a little bit. So, spring foods and wines are finally making their ways back into our lives again. So, we find ourselves opening and enjoying bottles of crisp, refreshing whites and bright, fruity rosés a little bit more often. So, whether you have a small gathering or a large one, wine's always a great option. We'll actually be headed to a Midi family reunion on Saturday with hopefully some great weather so all the kids can actually enjoy the outdoors. And there's plenty of sides, plus pulled pork and the required hamburgers and hot dogs. So we'll be bringing some sparkling along with us because you can never go wrong with bubbles. I'm going to also bring a dry rosé and some Pinot Noir. And I know sometimes people get a little bit concerned with having a glass of wine or two and traveling because a lot of times at this time of year you might be traveling a little bit of a longer distance. So if this is the case, a great option for you are spritzers because the only extras that you'll need to have on hand is a sparkling water or some lemon lime soda. So all you need to do is just grab your favorite wine and fill the glass halfway, and then you can top it with either seltzer or soda. If you The soda is a great option if you like something a little bit sweeter. You can enjoy some Pinot Gris with a peach seltzer, a rosé with some strawberry, or if you'd rather have something on the red side, a fruity Merlot can be topped with a blackberry seltzer easily. There are so many options on the market right now that you really have endless possibilities, and this is a great lower alcohol option for people who will be traveling a little bit longer. So, since we're speaking about making wine a little bit more fun and approachable, I'm actually really happy to introduce you to our next guest, Denise Gardner. Denise is both a winemaking consultant in addition to being a wine educator as well. So thanks so much for talking with us today, Denise.
Thank you for having me, Missy.
Yeah, so you actually have a really interesting job. So you're not a winemaker, you're actually a winemaking consultant. So how does that differ a little bit, and what made you decide to move into that direction?
Yeah, so being a winemaking consultant full time, I basically work with a lot of different winemakers across the US and helping them make their winemaking decisions in real time. So we go through the process from harvest to bottle, and I help them make those decisions that will best serve their operation and help them make the best quality wine they can. How I went, that's me. That's part of my consulting. I'm sitting in front of some glasses and bottles of wine doing blending trials for one of my clients. But how I ended up going in that direction is because I had been working in extension, similar to what Kane is doing for the grape growing side. I was doing for the winemaking side. And through that position, I was able to meet just so many different winemakers, so many different winery owners. I was very active in the American Society of Enology and Viticulture Eastern section. And that awarded me this opportunity to see all these different wine regions across the US. And what I had noticed over those years was some similar patterns, specifically on the winemaking side, with winemakers really struggling to get professional expertise to help them address their problems. And so that was where Denise Gardner Winemaking was really generated.
So you actually mentioned on your website, dgwinemaking.com, that one of your goals is actually to keep wine fun and accessible for everyone's daily life. So in addition to your consulting business, you actually do a lot with wine education as well. What made you decide to develop that motto?
It's really goes back to my roots of getting in the wine industry. I had done an internship in France when I was a lot younger, and someone there had told me, wine really is the alcoholic beverage for everybody, for every person to celebrate any day. And something about that really stuck with me. The culture that I was engaging in there was just really, really nice. And it was never in an excessive manner. It was always just a moderation. You had wine with dinner kind of mentality. If you had a special occasion, you were picking wines for that occasion. And I really embraced that, and I really liked it. It's carried me through my career. And so I wanted to find a way to bring that perspective to the wine industry and to wine consumers, to people who appreciate wine. There's such a hurdle for wine consumers to really get engaged in the wine industry. It can be very, very difficult. People feel self-conscious. They don't know what kind of wines to buy. There's just so many options when you walk into a wine store. And we've all been a part of those experiences where you're made to feel uncomfortable if you don't know something about wine. And so I wanted to take a different approach and say, you can feel comfortable about wine, even if you don't know everything about wine that say someone like I may know about wine.
Right. So let's actually get to the fun part then. Wine pairing, some spring wines, Easter, Passover. So this is the time of year when people generally get together with friends and families. And so whether you're hosting a gathering or you want to bring a hostess gift, what wines to have on hand is actually a question that a lot of people have. So I'm going to offer up a few different scenarios, and can you let me know what great suggestions would be to bring to the following occasions?
Sure.
So one of the main things that people start to do this time of year is brunch. What's a great brunch wine?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to turn back to something you said earlier, which is you can always bring sparkling. That is the easiest thing to default to. And brunch is one of those meals where it's fully appropriate. Even if you weren't doing brunch, you could still bring sparkling. And the reason is because sparkling does actually go with everything. It's carbonated, it's refreshing, it's the acidity is going to match very well. The sourness of that wine is going to match very well with pretty much anything that anyone would serve. And the nice part about brunch is you could couple that with juice, or your spritzer suggestion was very creative. I like that. And so you have options to play around with the sparkling.
Okay, so the other one of the other major things right now is Easter. A lot of people do their Easter ham dinner. What's a great option to pair with your dinner?
Right. So here again, you can always choose sparkling, just rule of thumb. But ham really offers this nice advantage for a meal. And that's because ham is very salty and it's very smoky in most occasions. Now I know there's some other flavored hams out there, but in general, saltiness, smokiness. And so this is really the place where you can think spring when it comes to wine. So I like to look at things like the aromatic white varieties, your Rieslings, your Gewürztraminers, or Gewürzes, if you can't say Gewürztraminer, Vidal Blanc, which I have featured here with the jelly beans as a candy pairing, which I think we'll talk about. These are all really nice options. The other thing could be a rosé, and you can go dry or sweet in this case, because again, the saltiness of the ham is really going to help accentuate that wine. So I think you have a lot of things to play with. You can go dry and sweet on any of those varietals and really have a nice meal.
So, what if instead of doing Easter, you're celebrating Passover? Because Passover actually begins around the same time as Easter
Yeah.
celebrations do this year. So, Passover, what are some really great Passover options?
So Passover is a little bit different. I think traditionally Passover you always served red wines. The key for Passover is that you want kosher for Passover wine, so they should be certified for that. And if traditionally it was always red wines that you would enjoy during the Seder, some families may feel comfortable only using red wines, and so that kosher for Passover red wines is definitely an option. Here, it's not really about the wine pairing. It's about what the wine symbolizes during the Seder and being an active part of the Seder during the Passover meal. So our family does it a little bit differently. When I choose wines for Passover, to take into consideration people's taste tolerances or taste preferences, I tend to use a variety of different kosher for Passover wines. So this may include whites, dry and sweet whites, some rosés. and then also the red wines for the traditional component. There's almost always a bottle of Manischewitz for every Seder. So that's a go-to. But here in this image that popped up, I'm featuring Binah Winery, which is actually in Pennsylvania, and they produce a series of kosher for Passover wines. Last year, I tried their rosé. This year, we're going to try some of their reds, whites, and also have the rosé.
Yeah, so that's a great option. So just because you need a kosher wine, it's amazing. We do actually have a winery located in the actually Allentown area, the Benai Winery, and they are kosher, so you do have options that way. So
Yeah, they do a
let's
nice job.
yeah, so let's move past holidays and let's just move back into it's warm. It's spring. The sun is finally out. Today is actually a perfect day for this. I think it's supposed to be around 70 for us. So, what is your go to if you're going to relax on the porch on a beautiful spring day? What do you think is a great option for a wine for that?
So if anybody follows my sip and swirl, I think by April I'm knee deep in rosé wines. That's really what I'm going to. Um, they're just so refreshing. You get that fresh strawberry aromatic, and rosés are made in so many different styles now. Again, you can go dry or sweet with a rosé, so it's going to depend on the producer that you select from. We traditionally drink drier rosés, but I've noticed in the past few years that some of these can be a little bit more aromatic, offering more floral or tropical fruit tones in addition to that strawberry. And others can be very neutral. And I just love them. They're refreshing. They have very crisp sourness, acidity. Um, and they just remind you, spring's on the way. When you look outside, you can see all those pink buds breaking, and it really does have that spring feel to it.
Okay, so just because you're not going out doesn't mean you can't have a fun afternoon. You actually put together some great suggestions for Easter candy and wine, and they can go to your full website for all the full details. But if they want to make sure they do this at home, what are some candy and wines that they should definitely have on hand by the time the Easter bunny rolls around?
Right. So I think I did jelly beans, peeps, peanut butter eggs, and then a dark chocolate selection. If you don't have peanut butter eggs, you could substitute that for any milk chocolate candy or any white chocolate candy. The jelly beans I pair traditionally with Vidal Blanc. So you can find that at a number of wineries within Pennsylvania. It's a really nice aromatic varietal. Traditionally, it's sweet, but the sweetness levels can vary from winery to winery. The trick here, because it is candy, is you always want the wine to be sweeter than the candy. If the wine is not sweeter than the candy, then when you taste the wine after you've eaten the candy, the wine's going to taste more sour. It might taste a little bit more bitter. It may not have the body or mouthfeel, the viscosity that it typically has when you're just sipping the wine by itself. For peeps, I put those with Moscato. So the picture here features Manatawny Creek's Moscato, but I know that there are a number of Moscatos that are produced across Pennsylvania that can offer a really nice pairing here. And it is a really fun pairing, the peeps with the Moscato. If you really wanted to make something visual, you could always put little parts of the peep into the wine. You get some bubbles, some coloring, whatever your heart desires. And then for the milk chocolate or the peanut butter eggs, I use a tawny port for this. So I don't know if anybody in Pennsylvania that produces a tawny port off the top of my head, but this one feature here is from Portugal. It's a tawny port. And I like this because tawnies are very caramel in nature. They have that toffee caramel type of flavor. And it goes really nicely with the milk chocolate. And the peanut butter doesn't seem to very much compete with that when you're tasting them side by side. And then dark chocolate for all my dark chocolate lovers. Maybe the kids aren't eating the dark chocolate and you want to have your own little piece of indulgence. I would say this goes really well with ruby ports. So again, ports are always sweet. You can not go wrong with a port when you're pairing it with something like candy. In this case, the concentrated fruit flavors, your raspberry, cherries, red berries, that all couples very nicely with the bitter and deep flavors associated with the dark chocolate, the mocha, the cocoa. They just go very nicely together.
So, in addition to all these fun different pairings in your blog that you actually have some really amazing and unique virtual classes that you do. So, can you let everyone know a little bit more about these and where they can actually connect with you?
Sure. So I'll do first where you can connect with me is at dgwinemaking.com. That's short for my name, Denise Gardner, winemaking.com. And you would want to select the wine lovers side. That's where all of the fun wine information is located. If you're a winemaker, you would go to the winemaker side. Inside there is the Sip and Swirl newsletter, which is featured here on the screen. So I send out a Sip and Swirl about once a month. And these are always something fun. It's always about enjoying wine. And I almost always will tell you what styles of wine I'm talking about. I provide little cards that you can print out. So if you went to a wine store, you have a reference and you know where to go. I just released a special edition for Passover and Easter, which we talked a little bit about here. So they're all up there. You can read past editions and subscribe to those if you'd like. For the classes, they're on a bit of a pause. There is one free class open right now, but I'm reformatting a bunch of them. But here's what we have. We have some bottles and blooms classes. So these are making floral arrangements and then coupling that with wine pairings. There is one free class available on there if that's something interesting for you to do. And then there's two other classes, wine purchasing with pizzazz, which is all about going into a wine store with confidence or scrolling through an online store with confidence and purchasing a wine, even if you've never tried it before. I also talk a little bit about local wines, depending on where local is for you. So that's that class's focus. And then Sip Your Enthusiasm, which will be coming out later, is about how to enjoy wine at home, even if you don't have all the glassware, all of the things that you see wine enthusiasts talk about. It's really about embracing wine for what it is and finding enjoyment in it.
Wonderful. So Denise has great information on her website. It's wonderful to go join it. So you want to make sure you check out all that she has to offer at dgwinemaking.com. And thanks so much for all the information that you passed on with us today. We enjoyed having you on, Denise.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so much fun to be able to talk about wine in such a fun way.
Well, thanks again. So don't forget that Pennsylvania wines are perfect to include in your upcoming celebrations, from Passover to Easter to Earth Day, or maybe just celebrating that first warm day of spring. There are actually hundreds of wineries spread throughout the entire state, and they range from dry to sweet to in between, so there's a perfect winery for each of you. Not sure where to start? Well, visit PennsylvaniaWine.com to find wineries near you or in a location that you would love to visit. Also, don't forget to check out Denise's website, dgwinemaking.com, for fun and approachable information about wines, and then also the classes that she has to offer too. So join us in 2 weeks for another road trip. This time we're going to be visiting the South Central region of the state. So don't forget to listen on the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month starting at noon as we stream live on both Facebook and YouTube. And if you can't join us live, you can always watch our programs whenever is the most convenient for you. Or if you'd rather listen, you can go ahead to Apple, Spotify, or your favorite place to stream your podcast, and you can download our show there. Don't forget to subscribe to the station so you know when new episodes are posted. We want to make sure we thank the Pennsylvania Wine Association for supporting this program with grant money for the PLCB, and we look forward to sharing more hidden gems of the Pennsylvania wine world with you next time. Have a great day.